What is up, guys? Welcome to my review for the third and final part of the Elseworlds Arrowverse crossover event, which is Supergirl Season 4, Episode 9. So much like Episode 2 and not like Episode 1, the opening monologue is changed. It's not Supergirl, instead it is Dr. John Deegan who narrates his motivation as well as his becoming Superman, which confirmed the fact that he is the Black Suit Superman, but I do think that his motivation was definitely explored more in this monologue, and it did a pretty great job at that. It also translated really well, or pretty well, relatively well to the actual episode, but I do think, and people say this all the time about storytelling, it's much better to show and not tell, and here they didn't show his motivation, they just told us all of it in one opening monologue. I do think that they did have the time to really flesh out this villain much more in this crossover. All of the time that was used for all the drama between Oliver and Felicity, that could have been used for an Arrow episode. All the scenes between Iris and Flash in episode 1, those didn't really need to be there. All of those scenes, and especially in this episode, all the scenes between Kara and Alex, which I thought were mostly pointless, could have been, instead of that, a fleshing out of Dr. John Deegan's motivation. That's really my big problem with the crossover in general, which it's not a huge problem, but it does affect the main villain in general. Outside of his motivation being fleshed out, I do think that Dr. John Deegan is a pretty great main villain for the crossover, probably the best main villain of a crossover yet, because if you look at the previous crossovers, none of them have had a single main villain who was good. There was Vandal Savage in the second one who was really bad. Then in Crisis on Earth X, there was Black Arrow or Dark Arrow, who wasn't very good, but here Dr. John Deegan, or Superman, or also Dr. Destiny at the end, was definitely really good. I do think that Tyler Hoechlin was actually better in the role than the other actor, who I can't remember his name, but I do think that Tyler Hoechlin was incredibly menacing in the role. He felt very powerful, much more powerful than the other Superman, which I will get to him in a second, but I do think, aside from his motivation being told to us and not shown, he was a pretty great main villain. So then there's this new altered reality, which is not nearly as entertaining or fun as the first altered reality, and the much more simple altered reality where Oliver was Barry, Barry was Oliver. That was just so much fun and so entertaining in the first and second episodes of this crossover. This new altered reality is nowhere near as interesting. It is still pretty interesting. Like, I think Cisco was definitely really entertaining in this episode, like his doppelganger, and I do think that the evil Superman, the whole concept of that was very interesting. I wasn't really explored much, but I do think that this new altered reality for this specific episode definitely did a pretty good job at what it was trying to do, which is have Oliver and Barry and a bunch of other superheroes try to get the real reality back. But in order to fix reality, they go get Cisco's help to recruit Superman. Again, Cisco was very entertaining, and then they recruit Superman, who immediately leads to a fight between Superman and Superman. Before that, there are these pep talks between Alex and Supergirl, all these scenes where Alex is just where Supergirl is just telling Alex how great a person she is on Earth 38. Again, I do think these scenes should not have been here. There could have been just one scene of Supergirl convincing Alex, like a really short scene, and Alex lets her go, or some other way Supergirl gets out of the prison. I thought these scenes were a waste of time that could have been given to Dr. John Deegan's motivation. I didn't like them very much, but then, like I said, Superman returns for this fight scene with Superman, which was a pretty awesome fight scene. There were some parts that didn't look great, like when Superman was like falling back from the camera. Didn't look very good. Or when the evil Superman dropped the good Superman out of a window. I don't understand what the hell is the point of that. Superman can fly, but I do think that in general this fight scene was pretty great because it felt like a watered down, low budget version of the Zod vs. Superman fight scene from Man of Steel. Also, I do think this fight scene was probably very difficult to film, considering both these characters are being played by the same actor, and neither of them are wearing a mask, so that sounds very difficult to film. So with what they were given, which was the same actor for two different characters in a pretty low budget, at least compared to something like the Man of Steel fight, it was pretty good, considering all those variables. So then it turns out that Superman actually knows how to change reality with the book, which I don't know how he can do that. Like, obviously it's explained with the fact that he's encountered the book before, which I guess means the Monitor already went to Earth 38, maybe years and years ago before Kara ever became Supergirl, or maybe very recently. Maybe he went to Argo for some reason to seek out Superman. I don't know, but he rewrites reality anyway, and Superman, the Flash and Green Arrow return, which was pretty awesome. Those two characters returning to their real roles of the Green Arrow and the Flash, which is the first time they ever were those characters or those superheroes in this crossover. It was a pretty awesome moment. So then there's the big fight between Green Arrow, the Flash, Superman, Supergirl, and Dr. John Deegan, aka Superman, when Superman, the evil one, swoops down and does a headlock on Barry Allen. I do think that the writers of this episode kind of forgot that Barry has certain powers, specifically the power to phase through things. He could have just phased through Superman, and this wouldn't be a problem. Also, later he suggests to slow down time when he could just do that himself, so I don't really know why they did all these things. I mean, it works for the dramatic effect of the episode, like, really, really well, but I do think that they kind of forgot Barry's powers. But anyway, this whole showdown is pretty cool. It does end in a really weird way. I do have some problems with this episode. Obviously, it's an incredible episode just for the fact that all these superheroes are teaming up versus all these villains, but there are some things in this episode that I do think was not very good, specifically the Alex and Supergirl pep talks. Those weren't very good. Some of the decisions made in this episode by characters didn't make any sense. Some shots didn't look very good. In general, it's an incredible episode, but probably the worst episode out of the three because some of the things just didn't make much sense. So then we get to what I felt like was the climax of the episode when Oliver confronted the Monitor. The reason I felt like this was the climax, much more than any of the scenes going outside of it, like before the action scenes after, was because the whole reason the crossover is happening is because the Monitor is here to test the Earth 1 heroes, and this scene felt like they passed the test because of Oliver Queen. Oliver Queen felt like the most important superhero in the entire crossover, or what he felt like he contributed just as much as the Flash, Supergirl, and Superman, if not much more. This is how you use a powerless superhero in a superhero team-up movie or crossover event. He somehow managed to feel like the most important superhero in the crossover, even though some very, very powerful DC superheroes like Superman, Supergirl, and the Flash are right there, and I don't think that was forced at all. This was not very good in Crisis on Earth X and even Invasion, where Green Arrow didn't feel very essential to any of that. In Invasion, he really didn't do much in the Dominator fight, and in Crisis on Earth X, he really was just there to fight the Dark Arrow, which I thought the Flash and Supergirl and basically any of those other superheroes could have done probably even better, but he somehow managed to do that. And I do think that I love the entirety of the climax in this episode, like everything to do with obviously Oliver confronting the Monitor while everything is happening with Barry and Kara running around the world. Even though I didn't like the setup for that, while it was happening in the climax, it was incredible. It looked really good, and it just worked really well being tied into all of that. Superman didn't really get to do much in the climax, which was very disappointing. I do think that he was a little underplayed in this episode quite a bit, but I do also think that when Oliver shot that cosmic arrow at the Book of Destiny and that created Dr. Destiny, that was incredible. Oliver ended the entire crossover event, which is just such a cool thing to think about. So in general, although Superman was a little underplayed, I do think this entire climax was pretty incredible. And Martian Manhunter and Brainiac were there also. Although Martian Manhunter, I just felt like Martian Manhunter in general didn't do anything, and he was very forced into it. Brainiac 5 did something, and he didn't feel that forced, but Martian Manhunter, he didn't do anything whatsoever, which that part of it was disappointing. But just to end this recording on a high note, the climax was incredible. So then, after the crossover event effectively ended after the climax, where Oliver shot that cosmic arrow, there were a bunch of resolutions to the characters. Namely, Superman got a lot. It felt like they gave him a lot of closure for this character. It felt like they don't really need to use him ever again. Maybe that was a precaution they did in case he doesn't get a spin-off show, which I do think it's a pretty large possibility that he will, because they said it depends on the critical reception and all the fan reception to this character, and it feels like people love this character just as much as I did from when he first debuted on Supergirl, and it feels like a lot of people would love a Superman and Lois Lane spin-off show, so that's definitely possible. He got engaged to Lois. Lois is pregnant. They're moving to Argo. A lot of things happen, but I do think since he's going there for at least 9 months, that gives them a perfect amount of time to come back in October 2019, which is when all the CW shows air their original episodes, or when they start every year, where they can start with season 1 of Superman, where he's just getting married with Lois. He's trying to raise John Kent, his son. I think that is definitely a pretty great premise for a TV show that I would love to see, although I do think Superman in this crossover was a little underplayed in general. I would have liked to see him a little more, and I would have liked to see him do a little bit more things. I still really want a spin-off show. Then there was also Barry and Oliver's annual beer session, which was pretty cool, and obviously the tease at the end, teasing Crisis on Infinite Earths next year, which was obviously incredible. In conclusion, although this episode was maybe a little bit worse than the other 2 episodes, it still was pretty incredible. Just because it's a crossover episode that I didn't have major problems with, I will give it a 10 out of 10. In terms of crossover ratings, I'd give it something like an 8.7, but still it does get a 10 out of 10 compared to other episodes in the season. So let me know all your thoughts in the comments down below. And if you like this video, don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe, and thanks for watching.